Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Kris. This is episode 2 of the second episode. This is my episode 2 of the second episode. How about that? This is Empire of the Seas. We saw the first one. He was up there lollygagging up around the sails, just having a blast, not doing any of his work. Or I'm making that part up, whatever. Thumbs up, subscribe, thanks, hype. You know how it goes. I'll start pausing the video every 15 seconds to remind you to do that. Let's do it. This will be another 19-some minute video.
Controlled the port.
If you could like, subscribe, thumbs up, which goes with the like. There's a thanks button. You can donate to the channel if you want to. There's a hype video. Thanks.
Looking for experienced.
So if you want to give the video a good old thumbs up, that would be great. You can. I'm just joking.
Recognizable to the naval press gangs who patrolled the ports, looking for experienced recruits. That was quite tiring, and the amazing part about that process is that every time the wind changes in strength, you've got to go back up there and alter the sails. There are some written accounts that tell us what life was like for all land, and all of this made them very recognizable to the naval press.
I don't know why it does that. And then goes backwards.
That was quite tiring, and the amazing part about that process is that every time the wind changes in strength, you've got to go back up there and alter the sails. There are some written accounts that tell us what life was like for ordinary sailors.
And they said you should thumbs up, subscribe, thanks, and hype.
One of the most remarkable is by Edward Barlow. He first went to sea at the age of 13. He came ashore for the last time in 1703 at the age of 61, a total of 48 years at sea, which was an amazing feat of survival. Throughout that time, he kept an incredible illustrated diary, and I've got it here, and it paints his life at sea in the most vivid terms and leaves you in no doubt as to how tough it was. He says, often we were called up before we had slept half an hour and forced to go into the maintop or foretop to take in our topsails, half awake and half asleep. There we must haul and pull to make fast the sail, seeing nothing but the air above us and the water beneath us, and that so raging as though every wave would make a grave for us. The Royal Navy, rebuilt and renewed with borrowed money, was able to avenge the defeats of the early 1690s. It even captured Gibraltar and Minorca, two important bases in the Mediterranean. The English Navy was now a global weapon, its ships opening up the wealth of the world to the merchant fleet thousands of miles across the ocean. And no part of the world was more important than the one that had first fired the dreams of England's mariners. The island of Jamaica was the largest English colony in the Caribbean, the most hotly contested and dangerous region in the world. In the autumn of 1708, a 23-year-old naval captain called Edward Vernon arrived here in Port Royal.
Edward Vernon, if I'm thinking correctly. Give me a second. I want to check it. Okay. Edward Vernon. He was... Go away. He was Admiral Edward Vernon. He's a British naval officer. He's also... while he was while he was serving, he had a young man named Lawrence Washington, who was the older half-brother of George Washington, and Lawrence Washington served under him and was at served under him, especially during the War of Jenkins' Ear. Lawrence returned and renamed his property in honor of Admiral Vernon because he respected him so much. So that's why Mount Vernon, George Washington's home, has that name. And if you go to his grave, I've never been there. This is just what I've heard. if you go to his grave, there is a little note that says he is the namesake of George Washington's home. So it was George Washington inherited it after Lawrence Washington died of tuberculosis, but Lawrence Washington renamed it. I think it was named, it's not important, but it was named like, oh man, like Dogue Run or something like that. But it was always referred to as the Mansion House back in those days because they had so many acres of farm, so you would meet at the Mansion House. But yeah, so Admiral Vernon, I didn't realize this was going to pop up. He gets credit for the name now. So there you go.
Nerve center of the Navy's operations. Vernon's father was an MP, and he disapproved of his son's career choice. But such was the draw of the sea on the minds of young men in that period that Edward had always had his heart set on joining the Royal Navy. He was just the kind of aggressive, bold commander that would thrive in an environment like this, where courage and initiative were key requirements. Vernon served in the Caribbean for 4 years, during which time the country was at war with France and Spain. It was the job of men like him to defend the merchant fleet on which England's prosperity depended. The Caribbean was the centre of world trade because of what was grown here. So this is raw sugarcane juice made from pressing the sugarcane. I'm going to have a bit of a taste. Oh, that's disgusting. That just tastes of mud, grass and sugar, which is not wholly surprising because that's basically what it is. But of course, when this is boiled down and crystallized, you get sugar imported into Europe in vast quantities to liven up the rather dull European diet, added to things like pastries, but also other imports like tea and coffee. Over here we have another drink made from sugarcane, and that, of course, is rum. Much more recognisable, becomes synonymous with the Navy in this period. Favoured drink of sailors. That's much more drinkable, but still a bit rough.
Back when I was drinking, my favorite drink of choice was like a rum and coke, and I would get the Captain Morgan spiced rum, which is good. But man, if you get those Parrot Bay coconut rum or there was it wasn't orange. I don't think it was orange, but they had lemon lime. Maybe they did have orange. Anyways, they had different flavors. Oh, I don't drink that. I haven't had a drink in like 10 plus months, almost 11 months now. And let me tell you, occasionally a good rum and coke just flashes into my mind, but I got British in me, so I get flush red, I get a headache, and so it's always like, oh, it goes down good, but then a half hour to the next 3 hours afterwards, I'm just like, ugh, I just feel warm, and it's just the after product is not worth it. But yeah, a good old rum. If you're out there and you're drinking, try those Parrot Bay rums. I don't know how big they are around the world, but coconut rum is pretty much the main one you see. And I was drinking that when I was on the beach a few times. Oh, delicious.
This became synonymous with Edward Vernon, because Vernon returns out here to the Caribbean as a senior commander, and he discovers that rum has become a staple among the Royal Navy ships' companies out here. They drink half a pint per man per day, so they're in danger of getting quite drunk and falling out of the masts and rigging when they go aloft. So he insists that the rum ration is mixed with water. Now, because his nickname is Old Grogham, thanks to a coat he used to wear made out of material called grogham, this new mixture of rum and water that's introduced on his watch is known as grog.
I've heard that term before. Didn't know what it meant. So that must be just watered down rum then? Huh.
Sugarcane was cultivated by slaves, as was the tobacco which was grown in the American colonies. The slave trade was a lucrative sideline. But the English did not have a monopoly on all these commodities. The Caribbean was a pressure cooker of competing nations, all jostling over a few small islands. The Dutch, the French, and the Spanish were all here, each of them greedily protecting their own interests, but also looking for opportunities to conquer new territories. And then there were the pirates. It's not hard to see what attracted those men to the Caribbean. And it was the job of officers like Edward Vernon to hunt them down and provide a violent deterrent. Many of those pirates were, of course, state-sponsored, known as privateers, because they carried licenses issued to them by the French and Spanish governments to prey on British shipping. Not that the British government was above using the profit motive either. In 1708, the year that Vernon arrived out here in the Caribbean, Parliament passed the Prize Act. This gave the captain, officers and ship's company of any Royal Navy ship a portion of the value of any enemy vessel they captured. At a time when a Royal Navy captain typically earned about £20 a month, and an ordinary seaman less than £1 a month, these prizes represented a significant salary bonus.
So this was in the 1700s. Were the Barbary pirates, they were active then, right? They got defeated in the early 1800s, and I think they'd been around for almost 300 years. So yeah, they'd been around. They'd been active. Had they, Britain at the time was one of the countries that was paying the protection. So never mind.
While he was out here, Vernon took full advantage. He captured several prizes. One was a Spanish ship laden with tobacco, another was French with 400 slaves on board. He brought them back in here to Port Royal to have them valued. Then, as captain, he was entitled to a quarter share. It was the most brutal form of incentive. Patriotism was now bolstered by prize money. Vernon embodied the naval revolution, rich, confident, and supremely professional. He was the product of a navy and a country that had come a long way since those dark early years of King William's reign in the 1690s. After 25 years of almost continual warfare, the strategy laid down by William III finally paid off. France and Spain couldn't match the vast resources being poured into the Royal Navy, and after a series of defeats, in 1713, they made peace. On this side of the channel, it felt like time to celebrate. This is the painted hall of the old Royal Naval Hospital in Greenwich, and the magnificent ceiling tells you everything you need to know about how the British saw themselves at the start of the 18th century. And I use the word British deliberately because after 1707, England and Scotland were joined together by Act of Union to form the Kingdom of Great Britain. And this is the image of that new nation, rich, confident, and filled with a sense of destiny. The central character is William, sitting in all his majesty, bringing peace and harmony to Europe. And if you notice,
He had a little angel with a little angel butt right in front of him. We all saw that.
he's sitting on the defeated figure of the King of France, the terrible Louis XIV. The overwhelming theme is, of course, naval. And at the end of the painting here, you see this vast British man of war towering out of the water with its cannons run out ready for battle. The decks of the ship are crowded with the spoils of victory, stuff, booty stolen off the French and Spanish. But fascinatingly, the ship is resting on the shoulders of a figure representing the City of London, all that financial wealth that she generated. And she, in turn, is above figures representing the great rivers of England, Isis, and a man representing the Thames, and even the Tyne bringing an offering of coal. The message couldn't be clearer. This vast, awesome military machine is totally dependent on the wealth created by the City of London. In 1726, just as the finishing touches would be...
How long do you think that took to paint? 3-4 hours? 4 or 5 hours, tops? Yeah.
Being put to this hall. The French philosopher Voltaire visited Britain and was very struck by what he described as the grandeur of state. He wrote, "Trade raised by insensible degrees the naval power which gives the English a superiority over the seas, and they are now masters of very near 200 ships of war. Posterity will very probably be surprised to hear that an island whose only produce is a little lead, tin, fuller's earth, and coarse wool should become so powerful by its commerce." Voltaire saw instantly that commerce and naval power were linked. It was a formula for success that was tied up with the creation of the Bank of England, and now Britain was reaping the rewards. Britain in the 1720s was a changed country. Thanks to the Navy, she had resisted the combined might of the French and Spanish alliance. But the coming of peace brought an end to 25 years of naval expansion. With no enemies to engage at sea, a generation of aggressive naval commanders took their fight to Westminster, where they argued the British ship of state should stick to its natural course: war. In 1722, the country held a general election, and former Commodore Edward Vernon became MP for Penryn in Cornwall. Vernon was a fiery patriot, and what really got him going was the Caribbean. During his 21 years in the Royal Navy, he'd served out there twice, the second time as Commander-in-Chief of His Majesty's ships in Jamaica. And while there, he'd seen ports stuffed with ships carrying the produce of Spain's American empire. And he'd seen how the Spanish Navy were all too keen to run away from a fight. Vernon was convinced that this was the soft underbelly of the Spanish Empire. "Attack their settlements in America," he wrote, "and Spain will fall. And if Spain fell, that would have dire consequences for her close ally France, who of course was Britain's greatest rival. So actually, Britain would get 2 victories for the price of 1. It all sounded like a great idea, but there was a problem. During the
Sorry, my phone keeps blowing up. All right, sorry about that. My phone was just going off. And then I did a quick search. No, it says there is no marker or plaque at Edward Vernon's grave depicting that. So what I heard was wrong, or they flat out lied. But the thing said it's in reverse. So Mount Vernon talks about that. My bad.
1720s and 30s, During the 1720s and 30s, the government's policy was to avoid war. But at the same time, British traders in the Caribbean were aggressively encroaching into the Spanish Empire, and they had the backing of merchants and former naval officers at home. Then in 1738, something extraordinary happened. A merchant captain called Robert Jenkins appeared here before Parliament. He was told Parliament that day was political dynamite. He said that the ear had been chopped off by a Spanish naval officer while he'd been minding his own business peaceably off the coast of Cuba. It unleashed a wave of xenophobia through Parliament and the public, and no one's voice was louder than Edward Vernon. Jenkins's mutilation was Vernon's gain. He strode into the Admiralty and demanded to be given command in the Caribbean, and Vernon got his wish. 30 years after he first sailed to Jamaica, Edward Vernon returned, this time as a vice admiral. He arrived in Port Royal on the 12th of October 1739 and began his preparations. A week later, the British government finally made up its mind and declared war against Spain. Vernon was now given official license to commit all hostilities against the Spaniards in such manner as you shall judge most proper. Britain's belligerent naval officers and her merchant class had got their war, the War of Jenkins's Ear. And it began when Vernon launched an attack on the Spanish colonial base at Portobello. On November the 21st, Vernon sailed into Portobello with 6 Royal Navy warships. They opened up a massive bombardment against the Spanish defenders. The lead ship fired 400 shots in just 25 minutes. The Spanish were powerless to resist, partly because much of their gunpowder was damp. When Vernon's men stormed ashore, only 40 of the original 300 Spaniards were able to resist.
If their powder was damp, why didn't they just light a little fire around the gunpowder so that it would dry out? Do I have to teach these guys how to fight wars? A terrible, terrible thing.
They surrendered within 24 hours. Britain rejoiced. The Navy had delivered on its promise, projecting British force thousands of miles away from home. And Admiral Vernon, the scourge of Spain, was a hero, heir to Drake, and the embodiment of a new imperial mission. A Scottish poet, James Thomson, really caught the national mood of celebration by penning a poem that became wildly popular. It contained the lines, "To thee belongs the rural reign, and thy cities shall with commerce shine." And in case you haven't guessed what it is yet, a few lines later comes, "Rule Britannia, rule the waves. Britons never will be slaves." These words have become part of our cultural DNA. Liberty, commerce and mastery of the seas, all rolled inextricably together. It was a defining moment in the creation of Britishness. Buoyed by his success, Vernon decided to attack Cartagena, the largest and richest city in Spanish America. He took a massive force of 8,500 troops and 124 ships. The public at home anticipated another easy victory. But Vernon had overreached himself. The attack was an uncoordinated disaster and soon stalled. Exposed to the extremes of the Caribbean climate and running low on water, the British were killed in horrifying numbers, not by the Spanish, but by disease. Worse still, Vernon was out of range of reinforcements, and so after almost 6 weeks of fighting, he was forced to withdraw. Cartagena was a wake-up call to a nation drunk on patriotism. There were limits, after all, to what the Navy could achieve. The problem wasn't so much ships and men, it was organisation. If Britain wants to realise her dream of global domination, then the Navy's internal structures, running things like logistics and strategic thinking, had to be of the same quality as her awesomely powerful ships and her tough sailors. The man who would take on that challenge was another veteran of the Caribbean, Captain George Anson. Following Vernon's victory at Portobello, Anson had been ordered to take a squadron of 6 warships to attack the Spanish in the Pacific, but his mission quickly turned into a nightmare. Anson's route may look like the trail of a drunken spider, but as he attempted to round Cape Horn, his squadron was so battered by storms that he lost half his ships, and after so long at sea, a third of his men had succumbed to scurvy, typhus, and dysentery.
So I'm guessing that's the storms blowing him all over the place. Damn, how much time did he lose just by all the zigzags?
Yet by the time he arrived back here in Britain in 1744, he'd become a national hero. Why? Because on his way home, as he'd passed the Philippines, he'd managed to capture a Spanish galleon, the Nuestra Senora de Covadonga. And in her hold was over 1,000 kilos of virgin silver and more than 1 million pieces of 8 solid silver coins. She was one of the most valuable prizes ever captured by a British ship. The public had a new hero to cheer, and the treasure was paraded in 32 wagons through the streets of London.
When he said they captured 1,000 kilos of, I was like, well, they're by Colombia, so cocaine is what I'm expecting to hear. Nope. Okay. And then I was like, well, yeah, Pablo Escobar wasn't around back then, so of course they weren't going to get any of the cocaine. Just entertaining myself. Sorry.
To cap it all off, just 6 months later, at the age of 47, Anson was appointed to the board of the Admiralty. George Anson arrived here just after Christmas, 1744, with a reputation as a man of action. And he was shocked by the bureaucratic lethargy he found. The organisation needed a shake-up from top to bottom. So this is it, the Admiralty boardroom, the beating heart of Anson's navy. I'll tell you what, it feels like a long way from the pitching quarterdeck of a man of war going around Cape Horn. But in a way, of course, Anson's experiences on that epic circumnavigation had prepared him well for one of these seats at this table. On that voyage, he hadn't just been the commander of a naval squadron. He'd had to become a shipwright, a teacher, a judge, even a diplomat. And of course, he'd seen the terrible effects of diseases like scurvy at first hand.
We're going to pause at that scurvy comment, which I hear is a new thing. A lot of kids are wanting that. Yeah, very popular. Bring it back, I say. All right. We're going to end this video right here. And we will be back with the next part, which is the third part of the second video. It's part 3 of 2. What? All right. We'll be back. Until then, keep your butt sitting down right there. Have a good day. Have a good night.